They say Les Mis is an overblown, overrated musical, but it's actually really good, and there's a reason it appeals to so many people, and it's not just the mega popular actors cast in the original Broadway production. In case you didn't know, I'm Laura Youngblood, and welcome to From Laura's Perspective. My channel is a video essay library with my content giving my take on a different topic each time, this time being social justice and one of my favorite musicals, Les Mis. Given that you clicked on this, I assume that's what you came here for. But if for some reason it's not, don't fret. Look through my page and you'll find a category of videos that's right for you, and then you'll have no reason not to subscribe. Moving on. Today, I'm going to discuss the themes of political and social justice and activism in the Victor Hugo novel turned iconic Broadway musical, Les Miserables. Now let's get down to it. We're going to start by discussing the incarceration, release, struggles, and ultimate redemption of our main character, Jean Valjean. The story of Les Mis is set in motion when the story's protagonist, a French peasant named Jean Valjean, is released from prison on parole. Valjean was originally sentenced to 5 years in prison for stealing a loaf of bread for his nephew, who was going hungry due to Valjean's sister's inability to afford food. However, Valjean's attempts to escape from prison led to this sentence being extended to 19 years. Although what Valjean did was illegal and would land anyone in prison, stealing food or money from a store or from someplace else is a very common reality for thousands of people at any given time struggling with food insecurity or lack of access to a sufficient amount of food that meets accepted standards of nutrition. After Valjean is released, things don't get any easier for him. A condition of Valjean's parole is that he must display a yellow ticket of leave, which indicates to those around him that he is an ex-convict. This badge of shame makes Valjean a social outcast and makes it nearly impossible to find a steady job or decent lodging until a bishop shows him compassion. The incarcerated are always complex individuals whose stories we never fully understand, so we always assume they're bad people. So they, like Valjean, are rampantly ostracized and lack access to many opportunities following their imprisonment. The Bible urges Christians to view and treat the currently and formerly imprisoned with compassion and open-mindedness. This does not mean approving of what they did to land themselves in prison, but rather looking upon them as people in need of help, healing, mercy, and compassion. So it makes sense that a religious official would be the one to offer food and shelter to Valjean when he can't get these things on his own because of the parole. After the bishop shows Valjean mercy for an attempt to steal from him, the bishop urges Valjean to use this precious silver to become an honest man. Following this prologue, Valjean moves to Montreuil-sur-Mer and disguises himself as a wealthy mayor and factory owner to hide his identity from Inspector Javert, who is tracking Valjean down for destroying his ticket and breaking his parole. That's going to bring us to the next issue tackled, which is Fantine's story arc and the treatment of women in society. In 1815 France, workplace sexual harassment hadn't been given a name, but it was very present in workplaces such as the factory Valjean owns while in Montreuil-sur-Mer. It's unknown what specifically is manufactured and produced at this factory, but it's heavily implied to be one of those factories that specifically hired women since their smaller hands were ideal for handling small pieces and parts. In Les Mis, the factory's foreman lusts after a worker named Fantine, a single mother who works there to give the Thénardiers the money they need to provide for her daughter Cosette. When Fantine doesn't accept the foreman's sexual advances, this makes him very angry, and he retaliates by making the factory a miserable place for everyone to work. To base workplace policies and practices on compliance or non-compliance with sexual advances is known today as a form of sexual harassment called quid pro quo, which is Latin for this for that. Fantine is made an even easier target in her workplace when one of her co-workers discovers a letter the Thénardiers have written to her about Cosette. As was common in the context in which Les Mis is set, Fantine is fired for her supposed promiscuity and having a child out of wedlock. With her source of income lost, Fantine sells her hair and locket, but it's not enough, and she soon finds herself with no choice but to sell her body to make money for her daughter. This is rough for Fantine, just as it is for so many young women who find themselves in the same situation, which isn't helped by the social stigma and shaming of prostitution. But this isn't even Fantine's breaking point. That occurs when a customer named Beaumont abuses Fantine and she fights back, and Inspector Javert attempts to arrest her. Valjean intervenes and has the very ill Fantine taken to a hospital, but this does not save her life. She eventually succumbs to her illness, but not before she and Valjean agree to have Valjean become Cosette's adoptive father. Although Les Mis is fiction, there have been many Fantines all around the world and all throughout history. That is, women who are forced to have a baby and raise the baby themselves because the father abandons them. These women are slut-shamed, harassed, and given very little help or compassion, if any at all, and deal with all kinds of sexism in both their workplaces and the social scene. It was because of all this that Fantine lost her job, was forced to sell herself into prostitution, and eventually lost her life. Cut several years later, the gang's all living in Paris, dealing with similarly serious issues. 7 years after Valjean adopts Cosette as his own, they're living in Paris and Cosette is all grown up, as is the Thénardier's daughter, Éponine. The Thénardiers' inn has shut down, leaving the family to live on the streets of Paris. It's at this time that the Thénardiers form a street gang, complete with a young urchin named Gavroche. This chapter of the musical begins with a dark and grim number entitled Look Down. In this song, the homeless of Paris express their plight with lyrics like, "Look down and see the beggars at your feet," and "Look down and show some mercy if you can." Lyrics like these perfectly encapsulate the vulnerability of those who've experienced homelessness all around the world and all throughout time, and still do today in many countries. In this song, it's revealed that General Lamarck, one of the only authority figures in Paris who shows empathy for the poor and homeless, is dying of an unknown illness. When the news gets out that Lamarck has finally succumbed to his illness, the students of Paris converge at the ABC Cafe to discuss what this will mean and what they can do about it. Thus comes about the 1832 Paris student uprising. The characters and storylines of Les Mis are fictitious, but the location and events taking place within it are real. In particular, the June Rebellion at the story's climax actually happened in 1832 Paris. Students built a barricade in which they fought for the rights of the poor and homeless of Paris. The students were met with violent backlash from the local authorities, and very few survived. The uprising in Les Mis mirrors that rebellion strongly. The Friends of the ABC Cafe, led by Enjolras, forge a plan for a revolution at the cafe while singing Red and Black. After Gavroche delivers the news of Lamarck's death, the ABC Friends know they can't delay the revolution any further. In Do You Hear the People Sing, they spread the news of their uprising, which gets some of the people of Paris on board, but angers those who aren't on their side. All cast members express their perspective of the upcoming revolution when Act 1 draws to a close with one day more. Those who are on board help the Barricade Boys by donating old furniture to help them build their barricade. One of the first casualties of the revolution is Eponine, who has fallen in love with a student named Marius, but Marius only has eyes for Cosette. Eponine dresses as a boy to fit in with the Barricade Boys, and when Marius is about to be shot, Eponine stands in front of him and takes the bullet. Unfortunately, just like in the real-world June Rebellion, the students lost their fight, and classism in France lived on. In Les Mis, all of the Barricade Boys are shot and killed, whom Valjean rescues through the sewers. Then we deal with the after effects of this lost fight, starting with Marius grieving the loss of his friends in Empty Chairs and Empty Tables. When the lyrics are separated from their subtext, Empty Chairs and Empty Tables could be seen as a song about grief and death. But in the context of Les Mis, it's more than that. Marius, recovering from his injuries at the barricade, sings this song at the ABC Cafe, lamenting that his friends who died at the barricade are no longer gathering at the cafe to drink and discuss their ideals like they once did. Not only does Marius miss his friends, but it kills him inside to know that the cause they fought so passionately for was lost, therefore their deaths were in vain. As Marius puts it, here they sang about tomorrow, and tomorrow never came. Lyrics like, "Oh my friends, forgive me, that I live and you are gone," and "Don't ask me what your sacrifice was for," are examples of a phenomenon called survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt is a form of PTSD in which a war veteran or survivor of another tragedy blames themselves for the deaths of those who didn't survive the event, wondering if they could have done more to prevent it. In the case of Marius and the Barricade Boys, all of the ABC friends who'd organized the June Rebellion are gunned down and killed, except for Marius, whom Valjean rescues by carrying him to a hospital through a sewer. In Empty Chairs and Empty Tables, Marius feels guilty for allowing his friends to put themselves in danger for a battle they ultimately lost, and also that he gets to continue living without them while their lives are cut short. But by the time it gets to the end, we're into talking about personal and political victory. Les Mis has a complex ending that's a perfect mix of sad and happy. The rebellion has been lost, many people have died, and even the main character Jean Valjean dies at the end. However, Cosette and Marius have a lovely wedding and begin their lives together, and Valjean is satisfied with the life he's lived and is genuinely ready to peacefully accept his own death. The final number shows Valjean entering into heaven, greeted by the bishop, Fantine, Eponine, and everyone who died over the course of the story. Said final number is a powerful, emotional reprise of Do You Hear the People Sing about tyranny and suffering being overcome and vanquished in the afterlife. Despite the many tragedies and adversities that occur throughout Les Mis, it ends on a hopeful and idealistic note about the future that they bring when tomorrow comes. Thank you all so much for watching. The novel and musical Les Miserables are popular for more than just its iconic songs and actors. The story touches on many political and social themes such as poverty, revolution, grief, and death. I touch on difficult topics like these and so much more in my series Politics, Society, and Culture. To hear more video essays about plays, musicals, and the theater industry, check out my playlist, The Wonderful World of Theater. You can see some of the aforementioned content by clicking one of the links on your screen. If this was your first time here, I hope you found this video intriguing and inspirational, and that it has you wanting to come back for more. And you can get more by subscribing to my channel and get notified every time by tapping the bell icon and switching it to all notifications.